The night was colder than usual in Winterfell, and it had nothing to do with the weather. It was the kind of chill that crept from beneath the skin, one that whispered of buried truths and long-dead oaths. In the dim candlelight of the Stark crypts, a shadow moved, slow, deliberate, and unafraid. Eddard Stark stood alone among the stone effigies of his ancestors. Their silent faces judged him, or so he felt. He had visited this place countless times, but tonight it wasn't for mourning, it was for memory and guilt. He looked at the cold stone statue of Lyanna, the sister whose death had shaped his life in more ways than anyone knew. In his hand was a letter, worn from folding, unreadable to anyone but him. Ned Stark, Warden of the North, was supposed to be a man of honor. That was the myth he'd cultivated carefully, no, strategically. To the realm, he was the North's moral compass, the last honest man in a kingdom of liars. But even compasses can be forged. The secret he had guarded wasn't just Jon Snow's true parentage, that was the obvious one. That truth, though dangerous, was manageable. What lay beneath it, what truly haunted Ned Stark, was that he hadn't protected Jon to honor his sister's dying wish. He had done it to protect himself, to shield his own ambitions, and to cover up a deal forged in desperation, one that had cost more lives than it had saved. He could still remember the day it began, the day he chose the path that would define his legacy. It wasn't at the Tower of Joy. It was weeks before that, in King's Landing, shortly after Robert's rebellion had seemingly ended. Robert Baratheon had just claimed the throne. The Mad King was dead, but the realm was still bleeding. Vultures circled every city, waiting to carve out their piece of the new kingdom. Ned saw what was coming: betrayal, chaos, more war. And he made a decision. He met Tywin Lannister in secret. It was never meant to happen, never meant to be spoken of, but it did. Ned Stark, the man who despised the Lannisters, who never trusted their gold or their smiles, struck a deal with the Lion of Casterly Rock. The terms were simple. Tywin would not challenge Robert's claim, and in return, Ned would ensure a northern silence. No inquiries into the sack of King's Landing, no retribution for the rape of Elia Martell or the murder of her children. That night, Eddard Stark killed his honor, but in return he bought peace. It haunted him every time he saw Jon's face, because while everyone believed Jon was a symbol of honor, Ned sacrificed to protect the child of a dead sister. In truth, Jon was the living embodiment of Ned's failure. A boy wrapped in lies to protect a deal forged in cowardice. Back in the crypts, Ned placed the letter in a hidden crevice beneath Lyanna's statue. It wasn't a confession, just a record. For the day someone might want to know the truth. Not today, maybe not even in his lifetime, but someone would dig eventually. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft yet firm. It was Maester Luwin. "Lord Stark," the old man said gently. "You've been down here a while." Ned didn't turn. "I speak to them, Maester. They listen." "Does that ease your burden?" "No," Ned replied, eyes fixed on the cold stone. "But it reminds me of the weight." Luwin studied him silently for a moment. "Winter is coming, my lord, but secrets they thaw. Then, may the snow never melt," Ned muttered. But even as he said it, he knew the storm was coming, and with it, the past would rise like the dead from the crypts, cold, relentless, and hungry for truth. Jon Snow stood atop the battlements, his breath clouding the frosty air as he watched the sunrise struggle to warm the north. He often found peace in solitude, but this morning peace eluded him. His dreams had been restless, filled with a woman's voice he'd never known, and a door that wouldn't stay closed. He didn't know it yet, but the door was real, and it was beginning to creak open. Back in the great hall, Maester Luwin was troubled. Ned Stark's nightly visits to the crypts were growing more frequent. Something weighed heavily on the lord's mind, and Luwin, despite years of service, had never seen him so withdrawn. It wasn't war talk or border disputes. This was personal, deeply so. Luwin had once asked about Jon Snow's mother, only once. The cold glance he received in return still made his bones ache. "The less you know, the safer we all are," Ned had said. But now the Maester wasn't so sure that safety was the priority. There was something frantic, almost desperate, in Ned's quiet rituals. Something coming undone. Later that afternoon, Catelyn Stark watched her husband from the solar. He stood by the window, reading an old parchment with trembling fingers. His face was grim, older than it had any right to be. "What is it?" she asked softly. He quickly folded the paper and tucked it into his belt. "A letter from Lord Arryn. Old words, nothing urgent." Catelyn didn't believe him. She hadn't for a while. She had lived beside Eddard Stark for nearly 2 decades. He was a man of few words but loud silences. The space between what he said and what he didn't was where she had learned to dwell. Lately that space had become unbearable. She had never loved Jon Snow. That much was true and undeniable. But what she hated more was the lie. Ned had told her Jon was his blood, born of a war-born affair. But there were cracks in that tale, small hairline fractures that didn't hold under scrutiny. Ned never visited the woman, never spoke her name, never even seemed to carry shame, just burden. And yet he had refused to send the boy away. Even when Catelyn had begged, pleaded, raged. "Why do you protect him?" she had once cried. Ned had only stared at the hearth and said, "Because no one else will." That was not the voice of a guilty man. It was the voice of someone protecting, something far greater than his pride. Catelyn turned away from him now, heart sinking. "You don't sleep anymore." "Winter keeps me awake." "You fear war?" "I fear the dead." She paused. "You mean the White Walkers?" "No," he said after a long silence. "I mean the ones we've buried, the ones who never got peace." That night, Jon Snow crept into the crypts, following a curiosity he didn't understand. He wasn't supposed to be there, but something called him, something beneath the stone and silence. His torch flickered as he moved past the carved likenesses of long-dead kings of winter. Their stone eyes watched, unblinking. He paused at Lyanna's statue. She was beautiful, even in stone. The woman Ned never spoke of, the woman everyone whispered about. His eyes drifted to the base of the statue. The stones there looked recently disturbed. Dust shifted unnaturally. He crouched down and found a crevice barely visible in the dim torchlight. His fingers brushed parchment. He pulled out the letter, heart thudding. As he unfolded it, the wax, seal of House Stark, cracked in half. He read, and his world shattered. Jon couldn't feel his hands. The parchment slipped from his fingers and drifted to the crypt floor like a fallen leaf, but his body remained frozen, unable to move or breathe. The letter, Ned Stark's own words, had peeled back everything. He thought he knew. He wasn't Ned's son, but that wasn't the part that broke him. He was Lyanna's son. Her dying wish had been for Ned to protect him, not out of love, not even out of loyalty, but because Jon's existence was dangerous, political, explosive. His true father, Rhaegar Targaryen, had named him in secret. A royal heir hidden in the north, swaddled in lies, and raised as a bastard. And Ned had agreed not to protect Jon, but to protect himself. The letter didn't hide it. It was brutally honest. Filled with guilt Ned had never spoken aloud. He had made a pact with Tywin Lannister to bury the truth in exchange for peace. A Targaryen heir would threaten Robert's throne. Ned had watched what happened to Elia Martell's children. He knew Robert would kill Jon without a second thought. So Ned lied. He told the world Jon was his own bastard to keep the boy alive. But Jon saw now. He wasn't raised out of love. He was raised out of necessity. A secret Ned regretted every single day. He stumbled out of the crypts, cold sweat sticking to his neck. Dawn was breaking over Winterfell's icy fields, but the rising sun brought no comfort. The truth was burning its way into his soul. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. When he did finally close his eyes, Lyanna's screams echoed through. His dreams, mingling with the clash of steel and the roars of dragons he'd never seen. Meanwhile, Ned knew something had changed. He saw it in Jon's eyes at supper, less warmth, more storm. The way he looked at him now, not like a son watching his father, but like a man trying to see through the mask of a stranger. Catelyn noticed too. She had always kept her distance from the boy, but this new coldness between them was different. Jon wasn't sulking. He was thinking, calculating. And for the first time in her life, she was afraid of what he might be planning. She cornered Ned 2 days later in his solar. "He knows something," she said. Ned didn't ask who she meant. Catelyn paced the room, hands clenched. "He looks at you like a knight who found a traitor in his tent. What have you done, Ned? What are you hiding still?" Ned's jaw tightened. He walked to the hearth and stared into the flames. The lie was supposed to protect him. Then why does he look like it broke him? He said nothing. What was there left to say? The lie had worked. For years, Jon had grown up safe, alive, but it had poisoned every part of their family. His silence had built walls, not safety. Catelyn stepped forward, voice low. "If he speaks, the realm will burn." "I know," Ned whispered, "and that fire will start here, in Winterfell." Jon didn't wait. That night, he rode to the Godswood, letter in his coat, thoughts on fire. He needed clarity. The old gods had never spoken to him, but maybe now, with his world shattered, they would whisper something. Anything. He stood before the heart tree, the red leaves fluttering, like blood-soaked pages in the wind. He knelt. "Tell me what I am," he whispered. "Tell me what I should do." No voice came, but footsteps did. It was Robb. Jon didn't move. Robb stood beside him quietly, glancing at the snow-covered roots of the old tree. "You've been distant," Robb said. "More than usual." Jon didn't reply. "I'm not blind, Jon. I see the way you look at father. What happened?" Jon finally turned, his voice brittle. "Would you still call him father if he wasn't?" Robb blinked, stunned. What do you mean?" "I'm not his son, not the way you are." Robb stepped back like the words hit him physically. "He told you." "No, he wrote it down. I found it." And then, for the first time, Jon placed the letter in Robb's hand. He let his brother read every line, every betrayal, every silent sin. And when Robb finished, the fire in his eyes was nothing like Jon had ever seen before. It wasn't grief, it was fury. Robb Stark didn't sleep that night. The letter had become a weight in his pocket, heavier than any sword he'd ever carried. He'd read it again and again by candlelight, hoping some new interpretation would rise from the ink, but it was clear, brutal, final. Ned Stark, the man Robb idolized, the father he had aspired to become, was not the man he thought he was. He had betrayed the realm's justice. He had betrayed his family's name, and worst of all, he had betrayed Jon. Robb had always felt the distance between his father and his bastard brother. Not overt, but cold in its quietness. He thought it was shame, a consequence of dishonor, but now he realized it had been calculation. A lie so deep it had stolen Jon's identity, stolen Robb's trust, and threatened to crack the very roots of House Stark. At dawn, he stormed into Ned's solar, slamming the door behind him. Ned looked up from his desk. The shadows under his eyes said he'd been expecting this. "You lied," Robb said. Ned didn't deny it. "I did. You lied about who Jon is, what he is. You lied to us all." "I protected him," Ned said, standing slowly. "That's all I've ever done. Protected him. You turned him into a ghost in his own home. You let my mother despise him. You let him grow up thinking he was less than me. That's not protection. That's punishment. Ned's face tightened. I did what I had to do. No, Father, Rob said bitterly. You did what made things easier for you. You traded truth for comfort. There was silence between them. Thick, poisoned. Rob dropped the letter on the desk. Did you ever love him? Ned, he faltered. I respected him. I feared for him. That's not love. And with that, Rob walked out, leaving Ned to stare at the flickering hearth, the words he had written now burning hotter than the fire. Later that day, Sansa and Arya found their brother Jon in the training yard, silent, swordless, staring into the snow. He looked like a man untethered from the world. Neither of them knew the full story yet, but they could feel it. Something had changed forever. Sansa approached slowly. You've barely spoken since whatever happened in the crypts. Jon didn't look up. I found out who I am. And who is that? A mistake. Arya flinched. Don't say that. He finally turned, eyes red-rimmed, voice like gravel. Everything I knew was a lie. My life, my name. I was raised in a house that fed me honor like it was food, and now I know it was poisoned. He wasn't my father. He was my jailer. Sansa stepped back, stunned. Arya just blinked, lips parting as her world shifted around her. That evening, Catelyn found her son Robb standing alone on the ramparts, watching the woods beyond Winterfell. She stood beside him, silent at first. You read it too, she said. He nodded. And? He didn't answer. She waited a moment, longer, before asking the question that had haunted her for years. Do you believe he did the right thing? Robb didn't look at her. No, I think he did the easy thing and called it honor. Catelyn let out a shaky breath. Then what happens now? Robb turned his head, eyes sharper than she'd ever seen them. Now we decide whether House Stark still stands for anything at all. Meanwhile, down in the crypts, Ned Stark sat alone before Lyanna's statue again. He no longer came here to mourn. He came to confess to the dead because the living had turned away. Is this what you wanted, sister? He whispered. To shatter my family with truths too sharp to hold? But Lyanna didn't answer. Only the cold stones around him did. They stood silent in judgment. Above, in Winterfell's heart, a storm was building. Not of snow, but of reckoning. Secrets had lived beneath these stones for too long, and now they were clawing their way to the surface. Jon Snow stood at the gates of Winterfell, with Ghost at his side and Longclaw on his back. The air was thick with frost, but it wasn't the cold that bit at his skin. It was indecision. He had packed light, too light for any real journey, but enough to leave, enough to walk away from a name that was never his, and a man who had claimed to love him through silence. He didn't want vengeance, he wanted truth. But sometimes truth was the cruelest weapon of all. Behind him, the wind howled through the towers, a reminder that Winterfell had never been a home. It had been a cage, dressed as a castle. And yet, as he stared out at the Kingsroad, he hesitated. The path ahead promised only more questions, more danger, more blood. What did he even want to find? A crown, a family, or just freedom? Robb found him there. You're leaving, he said, not asked. Jon nodded. I can't stay. Not after everything. Robb approached slowly, his tone heavier than usual. You're not the only one who feels betrayed. But this is your home too. No, Robb, Jon said quietly. It never was, not really. You know that. There was no anger between them, only sadness. Years of brotherhood strained now by truth that neither of them had asked for. Robbie looked out at the horizon. Where will you go? I don't know, Jon admitted. East, south, maybe even to the Wall. You'd go back there, after what you've learned. Jon shrugged. The Wall doesn't care who your parents were. It only asks what you'll die for. Robb studied him. And what will you die for, Jon? Jon turned to face him. The truth, because lies have done enough damage. There was a long silence before Robb finally spoke again. Then let me help, Jon frowned. Help how? I'm sending a raven to Lord Arryn, Robb said, and another to Stannis Baratheon. Jon blinked. Stannis? He's Robert's brother. The law says the crown should have passed to him, not Joffrey. If he learns there's a Targaryen heir alive, one raised by Ned Stark no less, it could change everything. Jon's chest tightened. I don't want to start a war, Robb shook his head. You wouldn't be starting it. You'd just stop pretending one isn't already coming. Jon looked away, conflicted. I don't know who I am yet, he whispered. Then find out, Robb said, but when you do, come back. Elsewhere in the castle, Ned Stark stood before the family's godswood, speaking to the weirwood tree like a dying man making a final confession. I failed them all, Lyanna, Jon, even Robert, he whispered. Behind him, a voice spoke, cold, controlled. No, my lord, you failed yourself. It was Maester Luwin. He had heard the rumors, seen the shifts in the household, the balance of power tilting, and he was no fool. I read the letter, Luwin said. Ned turned sharply. You. It was in the crypts. I saw Jon take it. I waited, and when he didn't burn it, I knew I had to read it. Ned closed his eyes. Luwin stepped forward. You always said honor was the North's greatest shield. But you treated it like armor, like something to hide behind. I made choices, Ned said, hard ones. You made lies, Luwin replied, and now they're crumbling around you. Ned didn't argue. He couldn't. Luwin hesitated, then added, Jon isn't just a boy anymore. He's a man, and he knows. The question is, when the world knows too, will you still call yourself a Stark? As night fell, Jon stood in the stables, saddle tight, eyes fixed forward. Sansa and Arya came to say goodbye. Neither tried to stop him. Will you be safe? Arya asked. No, Jon said, but I'll be free. Sansa nodded. Find out who you are, Jon, then tell the world. He nodded, then mounted Ghost and rode into the dark. Behind him, Winterfell remained, quiet, wounded, and waiting. Ahead, destiny waited like a storm on the horizon. The lie had broken, and Jon Snow, son of no one, was riding toward the truth. Winterfell's halls had grown colder since Jon's departure, not with weather, but with silence. The servants moved slower, the fires burned lower, and Ned Stark's name was no longer spoken with reverence, but with wariness, like a man, both feared and pitied. In the weeks since Jon had ridden south, ravens flew in and out of Winterfell with increasing urgency. Robb's letters had stirred something beyond the north. Rumors travelled faster than armies. A Targaryen heir lived. A bastard, raised by Eddard Stark, had royal blood, and the man of honor was now exposed as the architect of one of the realm's greatest deceptions. When the raven from the Eyrie arrived, it carried no reply, only silence. Lord Arryn was dead, poisoned. That in itself set fire to every whisper of conspiracy that had been brewing. And now Stannis Baratheon had declared himself rightful king, and he wanted to meet the boy. Jon reached Dragonstone with little fanfare. Stannis's soldiers were not welcoming, but they were curious. A bastard of Winterfell claiming a Targaryen name? That was enough to draw a crowd of skeptics. But Stannis wasn't one for ceremony. He met Jon in the war room, where maps of Westeros were marked with pins, and fires glowed not for warmth but strategy. You are the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen? Stannis asked without preamble. I am, Jon answered, though I never knew it until now. Stannis studied him like one examines a sword, checking for flaws, balance, worth. And what do you want? I want the truth to mean something, Jon said. I don't want crowns or castles. I want the lies that have ruled this realm to end. Stannis didn't smile, but his eyes narrowed. Approval, perhaps, or calculation. You have no proof. I have Ned Stark's confession. That is proof of his treason, not your claim. Jon stood tall. Then make it your weapon. Use me to expose the Lannisters. Let the realm know what was hidden beneath their golden lies. Stannis leaned forward. And when the people start crying for a Targaryen heir over a Baratheon king, what then? Jon hesitated. Then they cry, I will not sit a throne made of fire and lies. Stannis watched him a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. Very well. We ride for King's Landing at dawn. Back in Winterfell, Ned Stark stood before the hearth one last time. He had written another letter, one he would not hide in the crypts. This one was for Catelyn. He left it on their bed before he climbed to the highest tower, where the wind howled like the ghosts of his ancestors. He wasn't going to kill himself. That would be too easy. Instead, he summoned the bannermen. The great hall filled with voices, some angry, some confused, but all of them stared at him with expectation. I am not the man you believed, Ned began. I have lied to my family, to my people, and to my king. I did it to protect a child, but in doing so, I betrayed our values. He let the silence stretch. My son Jon is not my son. He is Rhaegar Targaryen's blood. He is the rightful heir to the throne, if such a thing still matters in a world so broken. Murmurs erupted. Someone cursed. Someone spat. Ned held up a hand. I will accept exile. I will step down as Warden of the North. The Stark name must survive this truth, even if I do not. Robb rose from the crowd. No, he said firmly. You may have broken us, father, but you still taught us to face truth, and now we will. Robb turned to the hall. The North is not a house of lies. We will stand by the truth, even if it costs us everything. And just like that, the Stark legacy began to shift. Months later, in King's Landing, Jon Snow stood before the Iron Throne. The city was under siege by Stannis' forces. The gates had fallen, the Lannisters scattered, and the people shouted for justice, not royalty. Jon never touched the throne. He stood beside it as Stannis was crowned, and when the realm asked for the story of the boy raised in Winterfell, Jon told them the truth. All of it. About the pact with Tywin. About the lies. About the price of survival. They called him a Targaryen. They called him the Wolf Prince, but he only called himself Jon. And back in Winterfell, the crypts remained silent, no longer hiding the truth, but guarding it. Because the greatest betrayal was not the lie, it was pretending it had been told for love.